A horse was howling. Not neighing, but howling, like a wolf calling out to its pack in the middle of a dead forest. And that wasn't even the strangest part. That mountain was once the largest wild Mustang sanctuary in the Pacific Northwest. Now, it's nothing more than a skeleton of scorched trees sealed in ice, the aftermath of a wildfire no one could contain, and howls no one dared respond to. Atop a jagged cliff, beneath a sky the color of ash and in wind that slapped the face raw, a smoke-gray Mustang stood motionless. One of its legs was buried deep in the snow. Its eyes unblinking. Its neck lifted, and then came the howl. No neigh. No pounding hooves. Only long, throat-tearing howls, echoing like a call to a different species, or an old soul that never got to reincarnate. A fire rescue chopper's camera swept past and captured the image. A young firefighter, after reviewing the footage, muttered just one sentence. "I don't think that's a horse. But I can't say it's a wolf either. It's something in between. Like, what's left when both worlds reject you?" Behind it, a collapsed cave lay charred and skeletal. The snow melted slowly, revealing a scorched horse skull, one hollow eye socket staring back at the cliff. Beside it, a single blade of grass had been bitten once, just once, as if something had returned here, but lacked the courage to stay. The wind howled. And so did the horse. Not out of madness. Not from pain. But because it was calling for its mother. Not a horse mother. A wolf mother. And that was the moment people understood, it didn't belong here. It didn't belong to any species. And it had nowhere left to return to. 2 years ago, there was no howl on that mountain. Only gunfire. Official. Sanctioned. And clean, on paper. The report called it an emergency culling to prevent disease spread. Foot and mouth had allegedly been spotted among the Mustangs. No tests confirmed it. But the protocol didn't require confirmation, just suspicion. And that's all it took. Jake Harper, field commander, signed off the order without emotion. Not because she didn't care. Because she was trained not to. Her pen scratched across the signature line like a guillotine dropping. 15 years in the wild had taught her one rule above all: mercy gets you killed. Mercy was for people in documentaries. Not out here. So they came. 5 trucks. 2 ATVs. 12 rifles. They rounded the herd with precision, flushed them into a canyon, and opened fire. It wasn't rage. It wasn't cruelty. It was logistics. A mare fell last. She didn't die instantly. That's not how bullets work in real life. She collapsed to one side, screaming in a way no one wanted to admit horses could scream. She tried to get up. Couldn't. Her back legs buckled. Blood steamed in the snow. And then, her body convulsed. None of the men noticed. They were already zipping up gear bags, marking GPS tags on corpses. They didn't see the way her stomach twisted. Didn't hear the wet sound that followed. Because while Jake was telling a rookie not to look. No one wants to see this. Just clean it up. A foal was born into a pool of its own mother's blood. Unwitnessed. Uncounted. Unnamed. It slid out half-formed. Legs trembling. Head lolling. It tried to stand, then collapsed again, into the stench of sterilized death. Its ears twitched. Its mouth opened, not to call, but to breathe. No one came back. They didn't even walk far enough around the mare to see her torn open. Later that night, under the shadow of an ash-covered ridge, a wolf mother padded through the forest. She had buried her own pups 3 days before, one by one, under a fallen tree that no ranger had bothered to clear. She smelled the blood first. But what made her stay was the heat. Faint. Fading. But there. She approached the foal slowly. Not to devour it. But to study it. And then she lay beside it. Not as predator to prey. But as a mother to something the world had already decided didn't deserve to live. She licked it. Over and over. Until its shivering slowed. Until its breath deepened. Until its eyes opened. And the first thing it saw in this world was not a horse. But a pair of yellow eyes that had once mourned her own. By dawn, there were no hoof prints. Only drag marks. Leading into the woods. And no one ever asked again why the head count was 1 corpse short. Because in the records, that mare had died without issue. No one questioned a death that wasn't even acknowledged as a birth. And no one imagined that somewhere in the trees, a creature born from guilt, blood, and silence was still alive. Learning to howl instead of neigh. Deep in the shaded gut of the forest, buried beneath roots and bone and silence, a den of wolves pulsed with life. But not the kind nature intended. Between 2 wolf pups barely old enough to blink, a foal, still gangly, raw-boned, and slick with afterbirth, shivered in his sleep. He didn't dream of running. He didn't dream of grass or sunlight or hooves pounding over open plains. He dreamed of breath. Of teeth that didn't bite. Of fur that smelled like heat and safety. When he whimpered, the pups nestled tighter against him. When he flailed, still learning how to own his legs, the wolf mother clamped her mouth gently around his throat, not to punish, but to teach stillness. She licked his belly the way she once licked her own pups, and when he kicked, it wasn't in panic, but in play. There was no fear in that den. Only adaptation. He didn't learn to neigh. There was no one to teach him. When he tried, the sound came out wrong, a wet, gurgled wheeze that made the pups jump. So he stopped trying. Instead, he began to howl. First in mimicry, then in rhythm. Low. Long raw. His throat was shaped for a neigh, but he bent it into something else. Something between. He learned to bare his teeth when threatened. To lower his front half in a playbow when challenged. To paw the ground with curved hooves, not to dig, but to warn. By his first winter, he could sprint with the pups, shoulder check them off their feet, and snarl at birds who came too close to the den. He brought sticks like trophies. Not to eat. Not to build. But because that's what wolves did. And somewhere along the way, he stopped wondering why he didn't look like them. Because they never looked at him like he didn't belong. Until the smell came. Smoke. Fuel. Human sweat. The kind of scent that made the wolf mother rise stiffly from the earth, ears back, lips curled. He followed. Not because he knew. But because she did. They crept toward the tree line. And for the first time in his life, he saw something that looked like him. A horse. But not like him. Upright. Proud. Saddled. Tamed. And next to it, a human. Jake Harper. She was leaning against the saddle, scribbling into her notepad, boots pressed into the damp earth. Her face weathered, her jaw set like stone. She didn't look up, not at first. He didn't breathe. She turned. And in that moment, both of them froze. What she saw, a young Mustang, tall, muscular, but wrong. Eyes too sharp. Legs too coiled. Neck held low, like a predator. And then, it made a sound. Not a neigh. Not a whinny. It barked. Short. Guttural. Defiant. Then vanished. Back into the trees. Jake didn't speak for a long time. The ranger next to her frowned. "You good?" She didn't answer. She was still staring at the place where it had stood, where something not quite horse and not quite wolf had looked her dead in the eye. Then finally, under her breath, "Horses don't bark. Unless they've been taught to forget what they are." It began with something deep and wordless, not instinct, not thought. Just a pull. A sound in the wind he didn't recognize, but couldn't ignore. Rhythmic. Heavy. Familiar in a way that wasn't comforting, but ancestral. He followed it. Alone. For the first time, without his pack. Without the smell of fur beside him. Without the soft growls of his siblings. And then, from behind the tree line, he saw them. Mustangs. Wild. Free. Real. Exactly what he was supposed to be, and nothing like what he had become. They were breathtaking. Their coats shimmered under morning light, muscles rippling under sleek skin, tails flicking in silent codes. They didn't bark. They didn't stalk. They moved like water, together, fluid, instinctual. He stepped out from the trees. The moment he did, the herd stopped. One by one, heads turned. Ears perked. Bodies stilled. For a moment, there was hope. A pause long enough to imagine acceptance. So he tried. He did what he had always done with those he loved. He bowed low, chest down, hooves forward, tail swishing. A canine play gesture. He barked. Short. Excited. Nervous. And the world broke. The stallion's reaction was instant, not confusion, not hesitation, but attack. He charged. 2 tons of fury and blood memory, slamming into him with brutal force. The first kick shattered his shoulder. The second ripped the breath from his lungs. He screamed, not in pain, but in confusion. It wasn't a neigh. It wasn't a howl. It was a fractured thing, a broken noise from a creature who no longer knew how to beg for mercy. The mares flanked their foals, eyes wide with something more vicious than fear, revulsion. Another kick. This one to the ribs. He collapsed. Sprawled in the dirt like something half-born, half-dead. He didn't run. He stood. Limping. Head down. And walked forward again. Not because he was brave. But because he was desperate. Because he needed them to see, I am like you. I am you. But they didn't. They sniffed. They flared their nostrils. They turned their backs. He didn't smell like them. He didn't move like them. He didn't know how to speak. A young foal, maybe his age, stepped forward. Curious. But the mother screamed. A sharp, violent sound. She bit her own child's neck and dragged her back, as if afraid the wrongness might spread like a disease. And for the first time, he saw it, fear. Not of him hurting them, but of what he was. Not predator. Not prey. Something outside the cycle. Something that should not exist. The herd drifted away. No one looked back. He followed. 4 miles. Bleeding. Limping. Imitating their gait. Copying their calls. Mimicking their feeding patterns. At one point, he crouched beside a patch of grass, picked a mouthful, and dropped it in front of an older mare, the way he once brought sticks to his wolf brother. She didn't acknowledge him. Just walked past, leaving the grass untouched. By nightfall, his legs collapsed beneath him. He curled into a ball, not standing like horses do, but folded like a dog in the dark. He licked his own wounds. Because no one else would. And for the first time, he did not howl. He did not bark. He did not neigh. He stayed silent. Because he finally understood, he didn't belong anywhere. Not in the den. Not in the herd. Not even in his own skin. He was not a Mustang. He was not a wolf. He was a wound. A thing left behind by both worlds. And in that silence, under the stars, he felt something die that night. Not his body. But his certainty. The question wasn't, who am I? It was far worse, what if I am nothing? The betrayal didn't come from the outside. It never does. It came from within. From the den. From the family he trusted, from the one who was supposed to protect him when nothing else would. The young alpha male had watched for weeks in silence. He'd watched the wolf mother press her body around the strange horse during storms. Watched her lick the blood from his face when the thorns tore him. Watched her give him first share of the kill, even when the pack went hungry. He didn't understand why the creature got her softness, when he, her son, only got silence and duty. Jealousy, in wolves, doesn't show as rage. It shows as instinct. As plan. As trap. That night, the alpha howled. High. Sharp. False. It was a cry engineered to be trusted, because it mimicked the one thing the horse had always followed, the call of his pack. He rose from the den, quiet, careful, limping still from the failed encounter with the herd. He stepped out into the dark. He thought it was a summons. He thought it was home calling him back. But there was no one there. Just wind. Just stone. Just silence where love should have been. Then the ledge gave way. A snap of frozen dirt. A roar of gravel. And then the fall. He hit every edge on the way down, ribs first, then hip, then skull. His leg twisted beneath him at a wrong angle, the kind that makes even prey animals scream. Blood streamed into the snow. He didn't call out. He just breathed. Sharp. Panicked. Broken. Because deep down, he knew, no one was coming. They hadn't called him. They had sent him away. Jake Harper wasn't tracking wolves. She was just looking for illegal snares, something she'd done 100 times. Boots crunching over pine needles. Flashlight sweeping. Radio off. But then she heard it. Not a howl. Not a neigh. A sound caught between species, like a scream trying to wear the skin of a bark. It froze her. It wasn't just pain. It was recognition. It was a sound that said, something unnatural is dying, and it remembers you. She moved toward it. Climbed. Scraped her knees. Tore her jacket. Heart hammering, not from exertion, but from dread. And then she saw it. Not a mountain lion. Not a deer. Not a wolf. Something in between. Slumped between two stone walls. One leg twisted, dangling. Fur and hide matted with blood. Eyes wide. Locked on hers. And he didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just looked. As if he'd seen her before. As if he knew she was part of the story, he just didn't remember where. She fell to her knees. She unlatched her belt. Pulled out the rope. Hands trembling not from cold, but from truth. Then she saw it. The mark. Just below the ear. A leaf-shaped white patch. Jagged on the edges, like a tear frozen in fur. The same one she'd seen on the mare 2 years ago, the one she watched bleed out in the snow while she told her rookie, "Don't look. Just log it." Her breath caught. Not from exertion, but from recognition. She hooked the rope. He didn't move. Didn't resist. He let her pull him back to life, the way a ghost lets you walk through it. Back at the ranger station, Jake didn't speak. She didn't change. Didn't wash the blood off her hands. Just walked down the concrete hallway, past the lockers, past the chatter, and into the archive room. She typed the date. She already knew what she'd find. Unit 47. Mustang Group D, Emergency Cull. 11 dead. Mare 028, dispatched. No offspring. Signed, J. Harper. The monitor buzzed quietly. A fluorescent light flickered overhead. And Jake stood there. Still in her blood-stained jacket. Still with rope burn on her palms. Still breathing in the air of her own signature, 2 years later. And then she whispered, so quietly it didn't even sound like guilt, "I killed his mother." But it wasn't just the death that shattered her. It was the record. The lie. The clean box ticked off. The line that said, "No offspring." As if he never existed. As if what she'd just pulled from a canyon of broken stone was a hallucination. But it had eyes. And breath. And pain. And a memory that had no name, but still recognized the face of the one who left him behind. Jake didn't cry. She didn't collapse. But something inside her, the part that used to sleep peacefully, the part that signed her name without thinking, broke. Jake never told anyone what he was. Not the biologists who called. Not the sanctuary director who left 3 voicemails. Not the rookie ranger who spotted a strange silhouette moving through the lower paddock and asked, "What kind of horse limps like a dog?" She just said, "Restricted case. Don't ask again." But secrets don't heal. They rot. And so did the silence between her and him. She tried to act like he was just a patient. Just another injured creature on her rotation sheet. But she didn't assign him a case number. Didn't enter him into the system. She hand-mixed his feed. Checked his water every 3 hours. Slept in the office above the barn, just in case he cried in the night. But he never cried. He didn't hate her. Didn't flinch when she brushed his mane. Didn't bite when she checked his scar. But he also never looked at her the way he looked at the door. The door was escape. She was obligation. And maybe that was the worst part. She wanted him to hate her. To snap. To rear. To make it easier for her to stop pretending she was saving him and not herself. Instead, he watched her with quiet eyes. Eyes that had seen things and forgiven them, but never forgotten. The fire came like judgment. Dry thunder cracked at 3:42 a.m. Lightning struck a tree near Ridge 14. The flames spread in minutes, accelerated by drought, by wind, by fate. By the time the alarm sounded at the ranger station, the west quadrant was gone. Jake didn't hesitate. She didn't even grab her gloves. She ran to the barn barefoot, still in her undershirt, eyes wild. When she burst through the door, he was already awake. Standing. Waiting. Looking at her like he knew before she did. She grabbed the halter. He lowered his head. Like he'd done it 1,000 times, and yet never before. She mounted him without a word. No saddle. No bit. Just trust. And they ran. Not like ranger and mount. Not like woman and beast. but like one thing trying to outrun what it had once created. The forest burned like an ancient reckoning. Trees exploded with heat. Crows screamed from above. The air turned thick, like breathing guilt. But he knew the way. He turned left at the dry gulch. Jumped the fallen bridge like it was instinct. Veered around the bare path without needing direction. He wasn't guessing. He was remembering. Because this had once been his home. And he was going back, not to escape the fire, but to save what remained. The impact came without warning. A boulder, the size of a refrigerator, loosened by flame, slammed into his right hind leg with a sound like tearing metal. He collapsed mid-stride. Jake flew forward, rolled, coughed blood into the dirt. When she stood up, he was trying to. 3 legs planted. 1 leg trailing behind like dead rope. The skin had split. The bone was visible. It was no longer a limb. It was a sentence. She screamed his name. A name she hadn't said aloud in weeks. A name he didn't understand, but always turned toward. She stumbled to him. Reached for the reins. Tried to lift him. But he didn't move. He didn't fight. He just looked at her. Then, he raised his unbroken front leg. Touched her hip. Light. Deliberate. Like a whisper saying, "Go." She broke. "No. No. I'm not leaving you." He didn't respond. Didn't beg. Didn't blink. Just stood there, on 3 legs, as fire swallowed the ridge behind him. Silent. Still. And already gone. She turned. Not because she wanted to. Because she had to. She ran. Half blind. Half mad. Screaming for wolves she hadn't seen in a year. And found them. Cornered in the hollow behind the creek bed. The mother was half buried in ash. 2 pups were clawing at roots for escape. Jake wrapped her arms around all 3. Pulled them through the smoke. Collapsing just as a water drop from the chopper hissed against the fire line. When they carried her to the evac site, she turned to look. Nothing. Not a shadow. Not a hoofprint. Not a howl. Just a drag mark ending in a splash of blood and a curved rib still warm from the inside out. Jake didn't cry. She whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so, but the wind swallowed the rest." The wolves huddled beside her. The pups licked her fingers. And somewhere, in the distance, a sound almost like a neigh broke and vanished. They said he died. The rangers. The biologists. Even the wolves, in their own way. Jake didn't correct them. Because part of her hoped it was true. Not because she wanted him gone, but because some stories are too heavy to carry into daylight. The drag marks had ended. The rib had bled dry. The fire had erased everything else. No body. No cry. Just silence, and a secret only she held. But secrets don't stay buried in ash forever. For nights later, the wolves began to gather. No one called them. There was no howl to summon. They just came, one by one, out of the black, like memories crawling back through the cracks. They circled the old she-wolf's body. Her spine curled. Eyes closed. 2 pups beside her, still nuzzling, not understanding that warmth could go cold. Jake watched from behind a scorched pine. She didn't bring her badge. Didn't bring a camera. She just stood there, arms around herself, like she was afraid her own skin might betray her. Then, They howled. Low. Long. Not beautiful, but raw, the kind of sound that isn't meant to echo, but to stay lodged in the earth. She shut her eyes. But she couldn't stop hearing it. Every note was an indictment. Every breath a question she had never dared answer. Why did you leave him? Why did you run? Why do you keep pretending your guilt is grief? Then, silence. A full stop. As if the pack had inhaled something none of them could exhale. Jake opened her eyes. And he was standing there. Not dramatically. Not triumphantly. Just, there. Half in light. Half in smoke. Leg broken again. Chest hollow. Eyes exactly the same. He didn't limp into view. He dragged himself. Every step carved a new line into the dirt. Every inhale pulled the fire back into his lungs. Every movement said, "No, I didn't survive. I came back anyway." The wolves parted for him. They didn't test him. Didn't sniff him. Didn't submit. They simply made space. And for the first time in his life, he stepped into it. Into a space no one gave him before. Not as an intruder. Not as a mistake. But as something else. The pups touched their noses to his flank. The eldest male lowered his head. And then, he turned toward her. Jake stepped out from the trees. Her knees buckled. She collapsed, not from pain, but from weight. Because the truth was no longer theoretical. It had a face. A body. A wound that still bled. And it was looking directly at her. He blinked. Then lifted his head. And the sound that followed was not a howl. Not a scream. Not a bark. It was a neigh. But not like any horse. It cracked. It warbled. It heard itself coming out. But it was real. It was the sound of something born without a voice, deciding to make one anyway. The wolves didn't respond. They didn't need to. Because that sound wasn't for them. It was for her. The one who left him nameless. And was now being asked, without violence, without blame, to say it. To name him. To admit, you existed. And I did nothing. Jake pressed her forehead to the ground. She didn't beg. Didn't confess. She simply whispered, through tears and dirt and shame, "I hear you." And for the first time, he turned away without fear. Because he no longer needed her recognition. He had made himself known. 3 days after the funeral, the transfer order came. Jake Harper was being pulled from the mountain. Family emergency, the letter said. A relocation to the city. A desk job. Better hours. More stability. Her son needed care. The cancer had returned. And this time, it was pressing. She didn't argue. Didn't protest. She just folded the letter in half, tucked it into her breast pocket, and walked out of the ranger station without speaking. But before she left the mountain, she came to see him. Not in uniform. Not with a halter or rope. Just her, in plain clothes. Carrying nothing. Except a question she didn't know how to ask. He stood alone, near the burned edge of the tree line, where the ash was beginning to bloom with new grass. The wolves had left. Or maybe he had. There was no sign of either anymore. Just him. She approached slowly. "I'm leaving," she said. "No one's making me. I have to." He didn't move. Didn't blink. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper. schematics for a private stable. Plans she'd drawn herself. Heating system. Reinforced floor. Large windows. She had even chosen the direction the sunlight would fall in winter. She placed it on the ground between them. "I can bring you with me," she said. He didn't look. He just tilted his head slightly, not at her, but toward the mountain. The meaning was clear. It had always been clear. He didn't belong to her. And never had. Still, she tried again. "You'll be safe. Federal warm. You won't have to fight anymore." He turned his head. Not sharply. Not with anger. Just, away. Like something that had already made its peace. And had no use for pleading. Then, he walked. No drama. No farewell. Just one step. Then another. Then the sound of 3 hooves over earth, and the 4th dragging, a limp that had become his signature, not his shame. He disappeared into the trees without once looking back. And Jake stood there, not crying, not breaking, but knowing that some things, once released, never return. A week later, a crate arrived at her city address. No return name. No label. Just a box, sealed with twine, marked only with a charcoal sketch of a wolf's paw. Inside, a sprig of wild grass. Half chewed. A stone scratched with a single, crude line, bent at the middle like a J. And wrapped in a bundle of black wolf fur, a single shard of horse rib. Clean. Bleached. Polished by time or tongue. Jake held the objects in her hands. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "You chose right." Because in the end, that was what she had offered, a home inside walls. Or a life in the open. And he had chosen the fire. The wind. And a name no one would ever write on paper, but everyone who heard him neigh would never forget. There's a truth this story won't let us ignore. That freedom always has a cost, and sometimes, the highest form of love is knowing when not to ask someone to stay. We cannot cage something wild just because it helped us heal. We cannot demand loyalty from what was never ours to keep. Some souls are born to break rules. Some creatures exist only to remind us what it means to live without permission. And sometimes, the ones we save end up saving us in ways no one else ever could. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel, if it made you see the world just a little differently, please, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let others hear this neigh. Let others know that even a creature born between species can leave behind a legend.